Thank you all so much, and many thanks to Aimee Nezhukumatathil, Ross Gay, and Kelsey Harris, who are going to read this evening, which is just amazing. I'm Mike Wendt. I'm the program director at Woodland Pattern. And I wanted to begin with a land acknowledgement and say that we at Woodland Pattern acknowledge that in Milwaukee, we live and work on traditional Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee homelands along the southwest shores of Michigamme, part of North America's largest system of freshwater lakes, where the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Kinnickinnic rivers meet, and the people of Wisconsin's sovereign and Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. We further acknowledge the grave evil colonialism introduced to these lands through genocide as well as slavery, but also via racist and xenophobic beliefs, laws, and practices that continue to inflict harm upon Black, Brown, and Indigenous lives. We honor those who have lived and do live now at these intersections of identity and experience and are committed to the active dismantling of white supremacy. I want to thank so much Aimee, Ross, and Kelsey again for taking part in the amazing conversation last night. That was along with Venus Williams, executive director of Alice's Garden here in Milwaukee, and the four of them just had like such a great conversation about gardening, agriculture, writing, and so many other things related. So thanks for that. And this shorter set of events last night and this evening is part of a larger series that's going to be going on through the beginning of next year called The First Function of Poetry, a social justice series. And that will continue next month, November 18th and 19th. We'll have programs sort of centered on mass incarceration, prison abolition, the role of writing and creative practice in the lives of those who've been affected by the carceral systems. So that will begin with discussion on November 18th, a Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. with Roger Bonner-Egard, Ashley Lucas, Kwabena Nixon, and Jamal Smith. And then there will be a reading the following evening, Thursday, November 19th, with Tongo Eisen-Martin and Cecily Nicholson. So I hope you will join us for those programs, and then we'll wrap up the series in February with a reading on February 18th, Ted Reese, Jasmine Gibson, and D.S. Marriott, all organized and hosted by Stacy Samazik, who's also hosting a workshop that'll take place over several sessions throughout February and March. So all this is to say, stay in touch with us, look up what we're doing, woodlandpattern.org, sign up for our newsletters, or print, and I hope to see you at those and other upcoming events. And the series itself is made possible with support from the Milwaukee Arts Board, the Wisconsin Arts Board, and the Brico Fund, and I want to mention that. Also need to mention that tonight, this event in particular, this reading is presented in partnership with Boswell Book Company here in Milwaukee, excellent independent bookseller. We're really happy to work with, whenever we get a chance to work with Daniel Golden and all at Boswell. So I do want to say that they have their own wonderful slate of events coming up. So I'm going to just share Boswell Book Company. That's how you can find them. And speaking of books and selling books and books being for sale, we have books for sale in our own virtual book center. I'm going to share that link, and including, let's see, we can fan out, right? The wonderful. Look at these. All right, got Beholding. We got Spit Verb in my mouth. World of Wonders. Also, this one has multiple covers, so like collect them all. You know, just saying.
Yeah. Mike, I'm going to jump in and say, yeah, those are 3 limited edition covers for that one. Special press.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No. Peter, Book Center Manager, thank you. And finally, before we move into some poetry, I want to say that we've been presenting our events. This one included on a give what you can basis. This began, pre-pandemic, but we've carried it through to our virtual programs because the support that's come from the sort of give what you can tickets, right, has really helped us continue to do what we're doing. So I'm going to post one more link. And that is a donation link. If you're in a position to do so, we deeply appreciate your support and are very grateful. And of course, more than anything else, are just grateful be here with you. So many thanks for that. And while we'd love to see you very much throughout the course of this event, please be sure that you muted. And then beyond that, we're going to wrap things up this evening with a Q&A. So consider some cues while you're listening to the readings. And I'm sure that the poets will have some A's probably. So we'll do that after the readings. So first up is Kelsey Marie Harris, who is a gardener, artist, poet, and pessimist in no particular order. She's the author of 2 chapbooks, The Jolly Queef and Bury Your Horses, as well as a full-length poetry book, Spit Verb in My Mouth, all published by Milwaukee-based Vegetarian Alcoholic Press. She also has a self-published chapbook, Sex Wound. Kelsey is a Bonk volunteer. Bonk, a fantastic reading and music performance series based in Racine, now virtual. An editor for Really Serious Literature. She's also 2020's Racine Writer-in-Residence, and in her capacity as Writer-in-Residence, I do want to say that she organized an incredible, exquisite corpse poem made up of lines from poets all over Wisconsin. So now I feel compelled just to share also one more link to read this poem, because it's pretty great. It's really amazing. Her poetry is fueled by anxiety, self-loathing, and chronic overthinking. Her poems have been published in Rust Mill, Horror Sleeves Trash, Forklift, Ohio, and Dredgenald. And Kelsey Harris's poetry were offered, borrowing a reference from, or to Spit Verb in My Mouth, a, quote, singular treasury of gorgeous, foul-mouthed gospels. Poems where wounds are, quote, trending blood, and, quote, the sun is always fucking California, but also where maybe flies are angels. This is to say that Harris's poems are marked by an incisive sense of humor while also offering some profound meditations on those things we often take for granted or entirely neglect to notice. And they're formally rich, from terse one-liners, thoughtful lyrics, social media aphorisms, and all of it so often with a fever dream surrealism. As Harris implores in the poem to the child who accidentally stumbles upon my poetry, quote, hide them in that spot under your mattress reserved for porn and love letters. This is an apt conflation, as these are poems at once beautiful and profane, at once socially conscious and deeply personal. In a world and in a country where, quote, self-care is an act of war, we need, to borrow now from a reference to Bury Your Horses, Harris's, quote, succinct and brash tone that proves poetry and philosophy accessible and necessary. Please welcome Kelsey Marie Harris.
Hi. Wow, thank you for that introduction. That was pretty awesome. I used to just say Kelsey Marie Harris has no degrees or accolades, but that sounded way better. Can you guys hear me okay? Am I good? Is it glitching? Oh no. Okay. So I'm going to start out by reading a few poems from a book that I'm co-authoring with my good friend Nick Dembski, and then I'm going to read from Bury Your Horses, and then a little bit from Spit Verb in My Mouth. On the darkest days of pandemic, I avoid the rooms with the tools I could easily use to kill myself. I've almost certainly witnessed a few animals die on their own volition. Squirrels, insects, a few birds. I'm convinced nothing on God's earth only serves to meet basic needs. Either that or we've skewed the parameters of need. I cry for the vegetables I've grown and wasted. I pour out a little liquor for the plum radish limp on the countertop. I wilt with a black butter Simpson. My tears pool in the craters of my neglected zucchini squash. I sowed the seeds and cultivated the soil only to neglect the harvest. I'm afraid I'll do the same to my children. I've taken on too many writing projects. What looks like being busy is my inability lately to say no. I've spread myself too thin like the peanut butter on the sandwiches I've been forcing myself to eat. I said I'd blurb your book, but I'm only smart enough to understand my own poetry. Self-loathing is a coping mechanism. I have a phobia of confidence. That's not to say I don't like myself. I do. I just don't think that's anyone else's business. I'm growing food I'm too depressed to eat, and when it goes bad, I die a little more inside for it. I went to get my tire plugged and a woman pulled beside me wearing a MAGA hat. She acknowledged her granddaughter. Yes, I see the no smoking sign, and proceeded to light her cigarette. As my car filled with secondhand smoke, I was convinced my children would get lung cancer and there is nothing I can do about it. Having children is the scariest thing we willingly inflict on ourselves. Having children is the scariest thing unwillingly inflicted on women and the states restricting abortions. Having Black children is the scariest thing God inflicts on Black parents. As if it isn't bad enough having to fear for our own lives, the idea my children will die for reasons beyond my control eats me alive every night, and every morning I'm reincarnated to live in fear another day. I read a poem by Daynaz Smith in a garden to the parents of Tyrese West and Dante Shannon, and I cried, and I couldn't face them afterward because I know they've heard I'm sorry enough, but I couldn't muster any words better than that. I wanted to say I can feel the pain radiating off their skin. It's the only type of burn melanin can't protect us from. The morning began with the feeling that it would be a good day to end it all, and ended with, it would have been. This is becoming a mantra. My motivation is flushable at best. I can't even bother dying. The peaches are in the toilet. The evacuate is in the crisper, but my screen time is down 30% from last week. So I celebrate with a wad of brownie batter I never intended to bake. It looks like shit. My toddler reaches down the back of his pull-up. He pulls out a wad of brownie batter, but the package says, safe to eat. And I know this is his way of communicating. For what it's worth, he's doing it better than me. I think of a suicide pact as a correspondence between two people. A shared document version of 13 Reasons Why without the teenage melodrama. A suicide pact is a prayer chain. Sirens drilled by while I watch my children play in the park, and I know that only means someone is dead or hurt enough to wish they were. I watch my children knowing they will die someday, and their death might be accompanied by sirens. I hope and pray I'm not around to hear them. I hope I go first. I don't pray often, but more, I'm sure, than people expect of me. There's a dead squirrel on the deck. It's big and it's warm. It's super dead, but its nerves haven't caught the hint. The flies latched on immediately, almost shamefully. And then I thought maybe they were collecting its soul. And then I thought maybe flies are angels. Paint it green and bury the horse under the porch with the others. The vibrator in the nightstand is a microphone, not to be confused with a megaphone. The vibrator is not to be confused. Love is a luxury like avocados and toilet paper. Massage my millennial mouth naked in the storefront, so long as you pay your rent on time, so long as you keep the lights on. Coffee stains on the drop ceiling make me insecure about my teeth. My jaw clicks when I stare into your eyes, maybe on account of the frog gig in your retina. As tadpoles, we threw seed pods into each other's backs and set the fields on fire when we weren't watching Space Jam. The soup was made from grass clippings. It never gave you flight, so we smoked dead leaves rolled in notebook paper. There's always a box of dead kittens in the garage, a live one pissing in the basement. A boy would be a gun if the barrel smelled like weed and peanut butter. If I'm on my period and I lie to you, I'm on my rag baloney. You'd understand if you knew to spell it without any R's. If you knew you could circle the parking lot, but you won't avoid the clowns. Quitting while you're ahead is not conducive to time travel. Paint your horse yellow. Bury it under the swing where we showed each other our genitals. The best pot for crying is a kettle with wings. Pour your tears in the community pool with the others. Self-care as an act of war is more violent than combat hand-to-hand or with guns. The van is waiting out back. The women have books and AK-47s as backup. The crawl space is a perfect size for children. The dirt in my nails is my attempt at escaping. The virus lived 3 days on the light switch. Now your sister is dead. The government won't collect the body. Sheets once knew collect skin samples. Viral as a dance, viral as a sperm count, viral as decay and cheap vacations. Paint the horse gray and bury it in the schoolyard near the steps where the slow boy serenades you with B2K lyrics. On the last day, we build trenches, abandon the lines in the sand, find solace in a canoe ride after your mother dies. Next summer, a boy drowns in the same river. Irony tastes like leaving your drink alone at a party. Now you carry a basketball in a paper bag, ask for change outside the laundromat, cradle a baby doll on the city bus. According to the algorithm, there's always a kid with cancer, a girl giving head in the stairwell, a teacher who can't hide their vices. The ecstasy is mixed with the Altoids and the garbage cans are on fire. You aren't who you were except sometimes between the lines and the notes you pass me under the table. You want to tell me we're going the wrong way, but hindsight says I should be the last to know. Painted blue and bury the horse next to the old Mustang broke down in the yard. Only because I like the irony. Only because I hate the raccoon family that lives there. Maybe this might drive them out of town unless they hate horses and therefore appreciate the irony too, in which case they can stay. I'm trying to achieve a new level of introversion I can't reach living in a house. The yard is off the grid enough to still have Wi-Fi and not have to feel like a person. I don't want to identify as human. They didn't put that option on the census form. The grass in the yard has grown tall enough, no one will walk back there. Life imitates art, yard imitates life, yard imitates vagina. Fill in the blanks. If you don't know what to write, check your homophones. If you don't know what this is all about, check me. I need to be put in my place, spanked even. I don't know if we're in Kansas anymore or if we ever were even. I'm art drunk, pretending to read all the books, taking mugs of wine and coffee to the face now. I'm stranded between Tuesday and Saturday. I'd write to you, but I've air fried my hands and my pens. Painted red, then bury the horse, probably in that spot you tried to plant a skittle tree. 20 minutes playing hide and seek with a squirrel, and I don't know who's stupider for it. All the boys I thought I loved were mentally challenged. I didn't know until later. No one told me, probably because they assumed I was too. They were right. I didn't know until later. Later, it seems, is always right now. I wonder what I'm currently oblivious to. I remember everything I repressed in vivid detail. The thing I'd like to remember, I forgot. My storage space is low. Apparently, I'm not the admin. Lately, I've been questioning the idea of who I think I am if I don't exist. There are never enough hours in our imaginary day. No one has had the bright idea of making up more. We accept what we've been told even when the evidence coughs in our face. I buried all my horses and swallowed all the goddamn paint. I don't want to die burdened by logic. I've got enough baggage to carry through the gates. Heaven has a small room for sinners with good intentions. It's one of those nights if you are dying on the side of the road, someone would likely find you. If you were dying on the side of the road, I'd find you and shame you for dying so publicly. Dying out in the open on a night like this, as if nothing is sacred anymore. I die under the porch or in the drawer or under a rock the way death is intended. I die off the grid. You die on this busy road for prestige. How many likes will you get for dying this way? How viral will go your demise? How validated will you feel when your heart stops and everyone approves of its last beat? I'm looking down on you from my secret dying tree, trolling you as if my death is more authentic, as if dead isn't dead. I crawled out from under my rock expecting warm weather. It's still raining. The more I'm around people, the lonelier I realize I am. I'm meditating An elephant's foot is pressed against my chest. To focus on breathing is labor. To focus on my heartbeat is terrifying. I'm almost sure I could burst it if I try. I'm afraid I will try. Some people relax by meditating or masturbating or painting. I did all three. I'm still anxious. Now I have shame face. I can't face my children. They know I'm incapable of love, but they commend my efforts. Who taught them empathy? How do they know tolerance when their mother is a pet rock with a painted face? A kindness rock. Nice quotes on small cold slabs. Perpetually meaningless in all ways except intention. The most worthless noun. A squirrel stood over another, flattened on the road. Could have been a lover, stranger, or nemesis. All I think inflict the same burden of empathy. Variant degrees on a moment of longing. Despite my best effort to swerve, the squirrel, almost certainly, dove underneath my car, the sound of the skull crack beneath my tire, too loud for its size. A dirge of sorts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. Thank you. That was great. Okay. Wow. So next up, we're incredibly lucky to welcome Aimee Nezhukumatathil, who's the author of 4 books of poetry: Oceanic, Lucky Fish, winner of the Hoffer Grand Prize for Prose and Independent Books, At the Drive-In Volcano, and Miracle Fruit. With Ross Gay, she co-authored Lace and Pyrite, a chapbook of nature poems. Her most recent publication is the highly anticipated World of Wonders, her first book of essays, which is a finalist for the Kyrgyz Prize in Nonfiction. Brand new news. Congrats. She is the poetry editor of Orion Magazine, and her poems have appeared in the Best American Poetry Series, American Poetry Review, New England Review, Poetry, Plowshares, and Tin House. Awards for her writing include an NEA Fellowship in Poetry and the Pushcart Prize. She is professor of English and creative writing in the MFA program of the University of Mississippi. Aimee Nezhukumatathil's latest book, World of Wonders in Praise of Fireflies, Whale Sharks, and Other Astonishments, offers lyrical and vividly descriptive delineations of the ways in which we might coexist with the larger natural world, the ways in which that world might instruct us, can inform and affect our relationships with one another. And more than that, as K.S.E. Lehman notes, quote, the book lingers in a world where power, people, and the literal outside wrestle painfully, beautifully. So there's also a way in which this natural history is a national one, an international one, and certainly a personal one. Orchidalpa trees, axolotls, and the pungent appeal of the corpse flower, among so many other wonders, offer lessons in how to meet the world, to mitigate personal and systemic harms, and to find love. It's of a piece with so much of Nezhukumatathil's writing, in particular, I think of Oceanic, which so beautifully walks a line between the immensity and intimacy of the natural world, and where multiple vectors of relation, threads of thought and wonder are so seamlessly woven. This is writing that can help us, quote, keep in step with our small dances on this earth, and offers a needful reminder to be present. Quote, I am still here, you are still here. Please welcome Aimee Nezhukumatathil.
Thank you so much, Mike, and everybody here at Woodland Pattern, Boswell's. Thank you so much for helping sell our books. It's good to see. I see some friends in the audience here as well. It's a Saturday night, so I'm so appreciative that you guys are tuning in on a Saturday night here. I'm going to read kind of a cornucopia of everything here. I've got some brand new poems. I'm going to read like maybe a paragraph or so from World of Wonders, and then I'm going to end with the last collaboration that Ross and I did, and it was for Tin House. So that's something special. I think we've only read it out loud together once before. So, and then I'll hand it over to Ross. So I'm going to start off. This is a poem, a brand new poem that was commissioned in pre-pandemic times for the New York Philharmonic, and it never got to, there was about 10 of us or so, and it never got to be performed because of the pandemic. So, but it was all celebrating the anniversary of the 19th Amendment. And this is called One Vote. And there's an epigraph here, and it goes, after reading a letter from his mother, Harry T. Byrne cast the deciding vote to ratify the 19th Amendment of the Constitution. All right, hang on. My parents are from countries, sorry, let me start. My parents are from countries where mangoes grow wild and bold and eagles cry in arcs and dips. America loved this bird too and made it clutch olives and arrows. Some think if an eaglet falls, the mother will swoop down to catch it. It won't. The eagle must fly on its own accord by first testing the air slide over each pin feather. Even in a letter of wind, a mother holds so much power. After the pipping of the egg, after the branching, an eagle is on its own, must make the choice on its own, no matter what it's been taught. Some forget that pound for pound, eagle feathers are stronger than an airplane wing. And even one letter, one vote, can make the difference for every bright thing. This is a poem from my collection, Lucky Fish, and it's the answer to when I used to visit high schools, one of the most popular questions that I get from high schoolers, and it's the title of this poem. And it goes, are all the breakups in your poems real? If by real, you mean as real as a shark tooth stuck in your heel, the wetness of a finished lollipop stick, the surprise of a thumbtack in your purse, then yes, every last page is true, every nuance, bit and bite. Wait, I have made them up, all of them. And when I say I am married, it means I married all of them, a whole neighborhood of past loves. Can you imagine the number of bouquets? How many slices of cake? Even now, my husbands plan a great meal for us. One chops up some parsley, one stirs a bubbling pot on the stove, one changes the baby, and one sleeps in a fat chair. One flips through the newspaper, another whistles while he shaves in the shower, and every single one of them wonders what time I am coming home. And I'm going to, this is called Blood Flower. And I don't know if anybody here has parents who text them every day. I do. For the longest time, they did not have phones, either of my parents. And once they did, it's like I woke the dragon here. This is called Blood Flower. Sometimes my gentle father texts me warnings or jokes or waterbird photos from his walk around the lake in Central Florida. Once, my father texted me what to do if an elephant charged me. Just watch its ears, Aimee. If they are pinned back, apparently you have just seconds before it attacks. Last week, my father sent tips on how to survive a python bite. Just throw mouthwash on its face or stab it with a saw. Neither of which I carry on my person. I live in Mississippi. I was more afraid of people in New York than anybody here. How they used to smile and ask you to sign a guest book, but then stare and follow you while you browse all the paintings. Start to approach you if you stand in front of one too long, the surveillance like being stabbed with a pen on your way out of the museum. I cannot figure out how to make my tongue loll the way the locals I love here in Mississippi say oil, and I can't figure out the red burst of a flower my gentle neighbor grows in a ceramic pot on her porch. She has long forgotten the name too, so I look it up. The stain of it, the rain of it. Its name lives inside me, of you. inside all of us. And the last poem I'm going to read before I switch over to prose is actually it's a red flower, and if you don't know, I'm going to type it in here. Baja fairy duster. You guys can Google this. It's one of my favorite flowers on the planet. It would have made World of Wonders, but I cut it at the last minute. But this is a poem of it. When you are near, I turn into a Baja fairy duster. By which I mean I look like that flower that fireworks in mid-sentence in the sky over the end of a sweaty ball game. The crowd makes its way to their cars while popcorn spill and multicolored chocolate candies melt into concrete steps. Maybe I mean you make me want to live beachfront, so I can taste the salt and cliff twist on each red stamen. When you're near, you call hummingbirds to my throat, and we throw our heads back and stomp our feet from laughing too loud in a cafe. I make good tears in my eyes, which means joy, and maybe emerald feathers fall to the floor. All the other patrons turn to glare. How dare we delight in the swoop of blossom and neck? I know it sounds like turning into a plant would not be fun, but have you seen a Baja fairy duster? The way it shocks the mountain trail, how it asterixes all year round. Perhaps you think I'd be sad to rely on sunlight and sea spray, that I would wither in the dark, but trust me, some people wait whole pink and proper lives to feel this even once. All right, I'm going to shift gears and I'm going to read a little bit from World of Wonders. And it's a collection of about 30 of my favorite plants and animals. And I'm going to read just an excerpt from my chapter on the narwhal. Oh, hang on one second. I'm not going to share my screen, but hang on. Okay. Narwhals are found mainly in the Arctic Ocean, but occasionally a small pod of them wanders into a Canadian fjord. Now the word narwhal comes from the Old Norse word nar, which means like a corpse, due to the distinctive mottled skin that looks like the spotted skin color of drowned sailors. Narwhals don't have a dorsal fin, and they have vertebrae in their neck that allow them to do a whale of a double take. The only other whales that share these unique traits are beluga. Narwhals eat cuttlefish, cod, and armhook squid. Nothing too disturbing, right? But it's the way they eat that can be alarming. A narwhal will swim up to its food very stealthy-like, slow and steady, opening its mouth and inhaling like the world's scariest vacuum. Then, in one giant and powerful gulp, it will swallow the unsuspecting animal whole. And did I mention that narwhals like to swim upside down? Can you imagine seeing a 3,000-pound narwhal sidling up to you upside down and slowly starting to open its mouth? Who are these toothy creatures? Who are these toothy creatures' predators? Orcas and the occasional polar bear sometimes hunt baby narwhals, but when orcas go after an entire pod, the narwhals just dive, 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 dive. They can survive at almost 5,000 feet below sea level. And yet, narwhals are classified as almost threatened because humans hunt them for their teeth and valuable fat supply. One afternoon in Kansas, my sister and I were riding the school bus back to the doctor's quarters. As we neared home, I saw our mom in our driveway unpacking groceries from the car. A chunky blonde boy on the bus asked if my mom was Chinese. When I said no, she was actually Filipino, he flipped his eyelids inside out. I cringed and groaned. I could still picture the greasy, dark who knows what jammed under his fingernails. I could still see his belly hanging over his Wrangler jeans as he chortled at his own joke. And then, as if flipping his eyelids wasn't enough, he tugged at the skin at the corner of his eyes and pulled it to his ears. I bet she's Chinese. Her eyes don't even look like yours. Ice. Snow. The white plastic of the milk jugs she was carrying in each hand as she smiled at the bus, scanning the faces of all those kids, staring for her own. I wanted to dive deep, deep, deep into the darkest of seas so no orcas could find me. I had no sword, and worse, no sharp tongue with which to sass him back. Instead, I stared straight ahead, gathered up my books, and left without saying goodbye to poor Mr. Johnson, the kindly bus driver. All right. Now I would like to invite Ross to unmute himself. Ross and I are going to read a little section. It's from the last, I want to make sure we're doing okay on time. Okay. It's from the last issue of Tin House Ever Ever. Ross, did you ever get a copy?
I can't remember it. I can't remember if I did. I don't have it.
Oh my goodness, we got to get the Tin Folks people to hook you up.
I know. It looks nice.
So it's a collaboration between Ross and I, and it's about trees, like maybe some of our either favorite trees or trees that kind of spoke to us once I moved here to Mississippi. Our first collaboration was when I lived in Western New York, and then this one is from Mississippi. So each of us take turns writing kind of a stanza, a chunky stanza, and I'm speaking from Mississippi, and then Ross will speak from Indiana. So it's from a as of yet unfinished project, perhaps, Ross. We'll see. And it's my bad. I need to go next. I know, it's on me. It's on me. And the project tentatively is called Some Questions About Trees. Mississippi. Of course, I read about the trees. I was taught to fear the trees at night and don't look too close into the branches. And I had seen a catalpa before, but I didn't know how mighty, how they grow under so much sun and shine. Some swoop so heavy and so low, you'd need a metal beam to help hoist its branches and the giant leaves like a skirt over a puddle. When you say it, catalpa, it sounds as though you're trying to chew a mouthful of gumdrops, all the smarting sugar already tongued off clean when you try to tell someone a secret. Have you ever told anybody, have you ever told a catalpa a secret?
Indiana. Not a catalpa, though how could you not fall at least a little bit in love with the cascade of dangling hearts, or with the shadow hearts herding beneath the tree like buffalo, that very most solemn of beasts? Is that catalpa? Shadow heart sounds like maybe not the best friend for telling secrets to. All the same, every spring I catch myself whispering to the redbuds, also a heart on the sleeve tree, though their hearts come, shadow and otherwise, after the flower is pushed from the wood like a zillion tongues telling their own secrets, which makes it kind of mutual, though I always eat some of the redbud secrets, which are ghostly sweet. You?
Mississippi. You and your redbuds. I never understood what you meant until I saw one here, how its blooms splash out from unexpected places, the most beautiful wound in a redbud's bark. I'm too nervous to taste tree secrets now, but I've surely smelled some. Surely my marbled lungs still carry spring pollen from loblolly pines, which suits me just fine. A glorious gold green rewarding everything in its path with a sylvan radiance. What else do I practice here but the lost muscle of breathing? Sometimes a scrape of nest falls from the loblolly pines like a mud turtle from my hands. Sometimes the moon gives me a scrap of paper, but I want to paint a whole mural. What charms your bones these days? What do you hold?
Indiana. The most beautiful wound in a redbud's bark. The most beautiful wound in a sycamore's bark. The most beautiful wound in a pin oak's bark. The most beautiful wound in a silver maple's bark. The most beautiful wound in a loblolly's bark. the most beautiful wound in a dogwood's bark, the most beautiful wound in a persimmon's bark, the most beautiful wound in a hickory's bark, the most beautiful wound in a chokecherry's bark, the most beautiful wound in a pawpaw's bark, the most beautiful wound in a black walnut's bark, the most beautiful tree growing from the wound in my small heart's dark.
Mississippi. And the slender tree in me is not a cave for bats to make a curlicue in the atria of my ripe hearts. If I let the tree ladder out of me, let it grow a bit wilder in the south, would trees give us sweet and would trees give us slow? This month the harvest moon lights each tree as if they hatched fresh from a gecko egg. What the moon does to magnolias here is something like a bit of magic, and it deserves a better name. Something celestial or clouded, but beautiful on the tongue. Did you know that a moon can have a moon, and that is called a moon? When twilight ends, I hope the moon I walk under becomes a cloud of perfume. My throat would color the end of the day like how scarlet milkweed creates such a flying, fine attitude in so many tiny mouths.
Indiana. It is not unheard of, this tree scaling through your body, scrawling amidst moon lit ribs, earthen letter inscribed on your tongue. And if this tree, to this owl, to this bat, swaying asleep beneath your breath, to this pill bug, or the thousand pill bugs glazed like gems in the fluffy black loam, two in you. Loam the moon licks through with light. To the coyote's whisker flecked with blood. To the fluff of whatever we killed for sport. The moon looms into a call ringing doom doom. Doom doom, doom doom, the trees these days ladder through my throat singing.
Thank you, Ross.
Thank you.
Now I'll switch it over to Ross.
Thanks so much, Aimee. That was great. And Ross, oh my God, and then Ross again. Ross Gay, coming right up, is the author of 4 books of poetry, Against Which, Bringing the Shovel Down, and Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude. Winner of the 2015 National Book Critics Circle Award and the 2016 Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award. His new poem, Beholding, is just out from University of Pittsburgh Press. His collection of essays, The Book of Delights, was released by Algonquin in 2019. Ross is also the co-author with Aimee Nezhukumatathil of The Chapbook Lace and Pyrite, in addition to being co-author with Rochard Warenberg of The Chapbook River. He's a founding editor with Carissa Chen and Patrick Rosal of the online sports magazine Some Call It Ballin', in addition to being an editor with the Chapbook Presses Q Avenue and Ledgemule Press. Ross is a founding board member of the Bloomington Community Orchard, a nonprofit free fruit for all food justice and joy project. He also works on the Tenderness Project with Shayla Lawson and Essence London. He has received fellowships from Cave Canem, the Breadloaf Writers Conference, and the Guggenheim Foundation, and teaches at Indiana University. In Ross Gay's latest book, Beholding, the book begins with a setup of an iconic shot by basketball legend Julius Erving and holds it over a book-length poem. A single sentence, in fact, holds Dr. J aloft, beholding as he ascends, quote, a great staircase made of air with joy. It's an extended image and imagining indicative of Gay's writing more generally. In his poetry, his is poetry that thinks in flight, that suspends moments, upends the very idea of the momentary and the linear. Quote, we all know nothing happens, only when it happens. In his body of work, Gay moves through histories, familial and national, through traumas, personal and systemic, through joy and gratitude, all with impossibly dexterous turns of phrase and thought, and generous and generative wordplay. Quote, how might I hold my beholden out to you, and you hold yours out to me? How do we be holding each other? How do we be beholden to each other? And so beholding, like so much of Gay's writing, is marked by careful attention, by observation that, quote, does not catalog or corral or specimen or coerce. I'll borrow a phrase from Ross actually last night during the conversation and say that his writing is, quote, a study in care, a study in generosity. Please welcome Ross Gay.
Thank you. That's so much. Such a such a beautiful introduction. It's so fun to be here. It was fun last night. Kelsey, it's good to hear your beautiful work. Goddamn, so beautiful, powerful. And Aimee, so lucky to get to read with you. Really read with you, back and forth, but to be with you. Boswell, Woodland Pattern. Lucky, fucking lucky. I'm gonna read this poem. And it's called Poem to My Child, If Ever You Shall Be. And I'm really, I can't remember exactly what I'm borrowing, but there's a poet, you know, one of my favorite poets in the world named Steve Scafidi. And this poem is like really stealing from Steve, you know, the spirit, or I don't know. I don't know if I have lines directly taken, but probably I do. Poem to My Child, If Ever You Shall Be, after Steve Scafidi. The way the universe sat waiting to become, quietly in the nether of space and time, you two remain some cellular snuggle dangling between my legs, curled in the warm swim of my mostly quietest self. If you come to be, and who knows, I wonder, little bubble of unbudded capillaries, little one ever a swirl in my vascular galaxies, what would you think of this world that turns itself steadily into an oblivion that hurts, and hurts bad? Would you curse me, my careless caressing you into this world, or would you rise up and, mustering all your strength into that tiny throat that one day, no doubt, would grow big and strong, scream and scream and scream until you break the back of one injustice, or at least get to your knees to kiss back to life some roadkill? I have so many questions for you, but you are closer to me than anyone has ever been, tumbling as you are this second through my heart's every chamber, your teeny mouth singing along with the half-broke workhorse's steady boom and gasp. And since we're talking today, I should tell you, though I know you sneak a peek sometimes through your father's eyes, it's a glorious day. And there are millions of leaves collecting against the curbs, and they're the most delicate shade of gold we've ever seen, and must favor the transparent wings of the angels you're swimming with, little angel. And as to your mother, well, I don't know. But my guess is that lilac blooms from her throat, and she is both honeybee and wasp and some kind of moan to boot, and probably she dances in the morning. But who knows? You'll swim beneath that bridge if it comes. For now, let me tell you about the bush called honeysuckle that the sad call a weed, and how you could push your little sun-licked face into the throngs and breathe and breathe. Sweetness would be your name, and you would wonder why 4 of your teeth are so sharp, and the tiny mountain range of your knuckles so hard. And you would throw back your head and open your mouth at the cows lowing their human songs in the field, and the pigs swimming in shit and clover, and everything on this earth, little dreamer of the new world. Holy. Every raindrop and sand grain and blade of grass worthy of love and love and love. Tiny shaman, tiny blood thrust, tiny trillion cells trilling and trillion, little dreamer, little hard hat, little heartbeat, little best of me. And then I'm gonna read this little section of a poem. So I wrote this poem, this poem is called Beholding, and it's a long poem, as Mike was saying. It's a long poem that sort of, you know, has a kind of anchor point or something. And the anchor is the study of this Dr. J move. So Dr. J was a basketball player in the 1970s and 80s. And, you know, the most beautiful basketball player to ever play in the NBA. And I write about this move that happened in the 1980 NBA Finals against the Los Angeles Lakers, where the prettiest layup that ever happened in the NBA history of the NBA happened. You should check it out. Maybe don't check it out right this second, but you should check it out. Layup, Dr. J. Look it up. It'll come up. in your video algorithm machine. But anyway, it's a long poem and it's ridiculous you can't excerpt it, but that's what I'm gonna do. And I just felt like reading this little section here because I'm trying to describe this photograph, but as I'm describing it, I kind of go on these digressions. And one of these digressions happens when in this little 4-second clip, there's a light, a kind of flash. And you could tell that in the 1980 NBA Finals, someone was sitting there and took a picture. And so for one, if you're stopping the move again and again and again, it goes blind in a way. It goes blank. And then I move to this, the poem moves to this photograph. And this is the photograph that the poem moves to. It's the cover of the book. But the little boy has on this, it's, like an aviator's cap, like a Lindy cap. I think Gerald Stern, the poet Gerald Stern, I showed him this picture. He's like, oh, it's a Lindy cap, like Lindbergh, I guess, aviator. So there's the flash. I so badly want the flash. I want the light like a virus blinding the screen and the flight in it to be a window or a door which right now I will point you to a real door in a real photograph I found looking through the WPA agriculture photos at the Library of Congress for my great-grandfather as a young man, a sharecropper in Osceola, Arkansas, with hands like a hummingbird's who could fill his sacks kind of quick, plus a bit more to sell on the side, which in the parlance of the day, the same parlance as ours, incidentally, in which you can own stolen land, in which you can become very wealthy owning stolen land, which all owned land is, stolen good, hot goods, the hot earth, which earth has been bequeathed as property, as heritable wealth, though the meek shall first inherit the heat, but the land, the cotton, the unshared crop, let's hereon call it what it is, loot, plain and simple, which to my great-grandfather's body was, loot, and his life, loot. His life was theirs, like the crop, like the land. They have been thrown overboard for the insurance. Breathe, let's breathe. It was called theft, which is to say, it was his life he was stealing. Steal away, steal away. And caught, my great-grandfather was made to quickly theorize both flight and disappearance by carving with a sickle a crude window into a man who mistook him for a door he could open and close at will. Yes, we come from poets. Steal away. And he stepped through that window by sitting on the sill and lifting first his one leg into his chest, and like that looked for a moment as though he was resting. How I wish he could rest, as though he was just a young man enjoying the day, looking upon the family of oaks near the road, their limbs always like arms to him. The shadows the leaves cast in the long grass like thousands and thousands of perched birds watching, closing his eyes and breathing in the gentle breeze, slowly circling and gathering in little eddies at his neck, which he was not, because he could be killed for anything. But he did look quickly behind him into this rotten house, the beams sagging with must, the plaster dropping in sticky flakes of flesh, before twisting his name, Frank Jennings, into a wick he lit and tossed burning inside the house while pulling his other leg through, gathering up what had just been cargo, what had just been loot, thrown overboard for the insurance. Breathe, breathe. His body, his life, gathering himself up in his thin arms toward the unknown and stealing away. And in the photograph I found and am holding in my hands, the grandmother leans against the door jamb made of thick timbers with an undulating grain, pierced periodically with knots, like the tear-stained eyes of elephants, like terraced fields or wakes ululating behind a vessel, Her chin is up and her jaw is tilted just so, as though chewing, or maybe running her tongue where a molar used to be, or contemplating a taste in her mouth, or preparing to spit, or looking for a clod of clay, or better yet, a fist-sized rock to smash in 1,000 shards, the looking this camera wants to do to her boy. Capture him, for she knows for the insurance, for she knows what they could do more than anyone. She knows what they do more than anyone. And her muscled forearms are fortressed across the diagonal striped pattern of her dress, which toward the knee has 2 holes, and suddenly like that, her dress becomes a map of the trades. The holes, the bodies of islands cast in the wind-combed sea. And beneath the dress, a short-sleeved lace shirt, the collar of which elegantly droops atop the diagonals. And you will notice as well on a loop of string circling her neck, a key somehow not where gravity would pull it, but poised almost perfectly opposite her heart. And just behind her, from the darkness, a child peeking out, looking out in the distance, which might be the distant eye of this camera, which happens also to be now this poem. Now, this poem. And though she doesn't touch the boy is hers. My own white mother, how many times told by white people, that brown child is not yours? That curly-headed, sun-loved thing you nursed and whose ass you wiped the shit from and whose very body you bore of your florid gore, at which, for the record, my mother here would say, that's a little much, Rosie. The many knives in her body, in her mouth, my mother did not know were there, sharpening, until in the supermarket, standing in the checkout, some woman, some white woman, staring at my white mom, alabaster in a daisy-speckled sundress in Painesville, Ohio, my brother riding shotgun in the cart, me on her hip, head tucked into her shoulder, away from the looking, probably almost making a face of disbelief. As she turned round and round in her mind, the impossibility of this maternal scene. No calculus to accommodate what she's looking at. Her brow furrowed in stupefaction as she cranks us round and round in the petite aperture of her white imagination. And my mother by now rocking the cart back and forth a little faster. My brother dozing from the rocking, all the while holding me on her hip. And seeing the not seen, Mom opened her blade untenderly to the gawker trying to fix us by looking up from her TV guide, and in a voice approaching the Luciferian counseled, yes, they're mine, and I have the stretch marks to prove it. And cut like that the eyes from the woman's head, her reflection disappearing for now, with the blade my mother methodically folded and planted into her pocket with the other daisies grinning on her sundress. My mother and her knives make a garden. One of the many linguistic varieties of the more familiar, what are you? What the fuck are you looking at? Which utterance can also be discharged as a look in the Arkansas sun. But you're the one bought the aviator hat the child wears, pulled snug, the long flap on the right side framing the tender line of his jaw, the face somehow of a dreamer, which you in this photo do not seem to be, though put the dream of flight on the child's head, which he leans shy into the door jamb, for he too knows he's being looked at. He knows he's being shot. He's being shared by people who don't love him, and so does not give his whole body to the camera. And I see the soft cast of that child's gaze, which if we zoom into his peach leaf eye, we see that he's not quite looking at the camera, looking at him, but rather somehow beyond it. His aviator hat's goggles catching the light which come from the dream inside the boy's head of flight his grandmother made despite. And looking closer at the boy's looking, you notice following the clean denim jacket and white collared shirt beneath it, which emerges at his forearm in crisply rolled cuffs. In his right hand, he shelters something almost floral, a rose perhaps, pale yellow, or even, you think, maybe he holds the nave of a magnolia bloom. Or it could be, it's true, a few bills, a little money. But by enlarging the boy until he fills the field of my vision, I can see it's an origami bird which he has made, and on which he might, with his left hand, be putting the finishing touches to the beak, that the bird might better lullaby, the wings folded lightly against his fingers, the bird's sharp head twisted back toward the child, looking into his dream of the sky. But the bird also cranes her little paper neck back in the direction of the grandmother, who, the more I study her, despite what I said before, moving her eyes as close to me as they will come, moving mine as close to her as they will go. I'm gonna stop there. Thank you.
And thank you so much. Thanks, Ross. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Kelsey. Woo. Just so good. Yeah. So now, if anybody has questions, we'd love to field those. So think about what those might be while I talk a little bit about logistics. Right. Of course, feel free to just drop a question in the chat, and I can. Read that and direct that to whoever. Peter, so many. So yeah, all right. Or if you would like to deliver your question, unmute yourself and talk, you can, sort of raise your hand maybe too. I see Peter. Hi, Peter.
Now I'm unmuted.
Okay.
I have a question, Mike. Hi. It's so great to see everyone again. And thank you for an incredible reading. Wow. I'm really lucky that I get to be the only person right now in Woodland Pattern, hearing a Woodland Pattern reading. So it feels really good. My question is a little bit to do with the talk from yesterday, if that's okay. You're talking about all the different gardens you had growing up, and I was just wondering if there was one item that's core to or one vegetable or fruit that's core to your identity as a poet and as a person. I ask because like a Yelp reviewer once criticized my family business saying that dill wasn't particularly Polish. I don't think they knew what the hell they were talking about. Anyway, sorry. But yeah, what is that vegetable for you? What is the vegetable that's at the root of you?
And they said that dill wasn't particularly poetic?
Polish.
Oh, dill.
Yeah, but if it's not, it is really poetic though. I think it's poetic. But,
I think it's very poetic. Yeah, that's what I think it's very poetic.
Thanks.
I want to jump in because I feel like it popped in my head that mulberries are totally important to me. And partly because we had a mulberry tree in the apartments where I grew up that was so, it was just like this place, like the big kids hung out there when we were little. And I always like to say the big kids, that means the kids beat you up. You had to run from them when you saw the big kids coming. But we would go up there and harvest. And I can remember like, just when it was that time of year, probably June, those weeks the mulberries were on, it was like heaven. And it was mysterious, because there weren't a lot of we didn't have gardens in the apartment. So these things on the edges, there were wild raspberries, which were also magical, but mulberries, and also partly because mulberries are some people don't care for mulberries. And mulberries also they make a mess and all this shit. And I fucking love mulberries, and I think they're delicious. And I love that they just spread, like birds shit them out, and they're just really hearty and remarkable. And you can probably make a nice dye out of fruit. I'm not sure about that. The leaves, you can eat the leaves, they give so much. That's my response.
Weeds. Definitely weeds, edible weeds, the things we take for granted: purslane, goosefoot, dandelion, red clover, the things that grow all around us just on their own, that so many of us try to poison and rip out of the ground, but are just so good for us. So yeah, weeds.
Wonderful.
Tomatoes will always be it's literally the first thing I can remember in a garden situation. I guess tomatoes, and then my mother's rose garden. But tomatoes is that just, I couldn't believe as a kid I still have that, like I get verklempt thinking about it because I get so excited at just, you can get this green fruit and it'd be so small, and then soon, I mean, it was as big as a little girl's face, you know, tomatoes so big, and they were so, I mean, it was fruit. And so sweet and good, and I love the smell of, I just love smelling like tomato leaves all day long. And to me, that's just summer. When that happens, it's just, I don't know, it's just happiness in summer. So yeah, tomatoes.
I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you, everyone.
And a pox on whoever said your dill wasn't Polish enough. Like, what?
Oh, like Yelp reviewers, they're Yelp.
Thanks, Peter, for that question. That was great. And everybody for wonderful answers. Okay, so let's see, scrolling. So Shannon is curious, what is bringing these writers wonder and delight lately?
I'll answer. Oh, sorry. We checked on them just before the reading today. We have, it's maybe the tail end. This is a little bit later than I thought, but it's monarch season here, or at least like monarch blooming season here. So we have about, I think, 3 now left, 3 chrysalises, just waiting to, and they're those perfect chartreuse green chrysalises that are just on the edges of our fence line. And for 2.5 years now, we've been growing milkweed and other pollinating plants, or pollinator plants. So this is that thing, you know, any day now. We have one that's going to crack any day now. And then just, it's the luckiest thing. I think my boys and I all just get so excited about it when we either see the emergence, or freshly thereafter when the wings are still so heavy and are still drying out and are really thick too. They're like little deflated balloons. They're not the paper thin, which I did not know before until I actually saw them hatch. So anyway, we're at the tail end of monarch season right now.
I mentioned before, I think folks came into the reading that we harvested a lot of sweet potatoes today. So that, and this moth is bringing me quite a lot. That's like pretty nice. But yeah, we had a nice sweet potato harvest. But also, I'm thinking about, I'm teaching this class this semester, and we're doing this class together. But tomorrow, some of my friends who I'm studying with, who are also in the class, and I are gonna, on and off in the class, we have to make a movie, like a 6 to 7 minute movie, in which this sycamore tree is the protagonist, and there has to be found text, and there has to be like choreography and all this stuff. And that's like what we're doing for the poetry workshop. So anyway, I'm excited. I'm delighted about that. I'm delighted that we got to figure out how to, and there has to be costumes. So we got to figure out how to make a costume and what it's going to be. And, so anyway, that's a thing. I'm feeling very delighted in the moment, being like, what the hell are we going to do? And then anticipatory delight, which is a nice kind of delight.
Amaranth. Grew amaranth, and I didn't know how tall it gets, and it's like taller than me at this point, and it's really, really pretty. And so every time I go outside, it just makes me happy to see it. So yeah.
What color is it, Kelsey?
Mine's red.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Yep.
So nice.
And that Michael B. Jordan is making a Static Shock movie. That also is bringing me lots of joy right now to find that out. I just have to throw that out there.
Nice, thank you. And another one here for Ross. I found from Mary, I found the narrative style of your poetry very powerful. When you are writing, do you consider yourself an observer, or are there times when you are a participant in the scene?
I think there's time. I I think both. Yeah, I'm definitely, I think there's ways that observation is like a key component of what I'm doing. But I also think there's a kind of way that being in the scene or reflecting on a scene or something, I think maybe particularly with those delights, the little essays, the delight essays, often it's sort of recollecting something that I've sort of participated in. And so it's also a kind of observation, like often a recollection, an observation of something about myself, but it is also about the participation. And then if I think about the poems, you know, like the fig tree poem is totally about like being with all these people, picking figs off this tree in Philly, or the mulberry tree poem that I have is very much, it's a recollective poem, but it's very much about being in the tree. So yeah, both. I think both is the answer to that. Yeah, thank you for that question.
Thank you. Visitor. I wonder if anybody else has any questions.
Oh, there's the moth. I wasn't laughing at your answer, Ross. I was laughing because the moth was like wanting to get in on it too while you were talking.
I wanted to go in my ear.
Nick, did I see? Yeah, all right. Yeah, there you go.
Hey, y'all. First of all, just thank you for blessing us with your incredible work, not just tonight, but for those of us who have been spending years with your work. You know, thank you for being a part of our lives, whether you know it or not. So Kelsey and I are working on a book together. We were, you know, it was just like, oh, let's write some poems together, which I love that you, Ross, and you, Aimee, you know, have made such a partnership and so much collaboration. But we, you know, it was just like, let's start writing poems in a shared document, because that's what weirdo nerds do, you know, when they're friends. And something that I've been kind of surprised, I guess, to see is just, you know, like it's so much of the poems are just about like not killing ourselves, basically. Like we're both coming from very dark places, and we're both coming, you know, we're both like navigating dark things. Ross, you came and read in Racine here in 2015, right after Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude came out. And that reading, I've told you before, but that reading changed my life. I came in, you know, so the Bonk Crew, the series that I run, it's a lot of like formerly incarcerated people, a lot of just people on the margins of life. And like I rolled in with a carload of people, and they were, you know, just talking about on the way there, like how they were barely hanging on in so many ways. It was a hard little ride there. And then that reading happened, and it wasn't just you, it was the others there too, but you certainly brought an energy that was like nothing short of holy. And everybody walked out, including the people that I rode there with. They rode home, and it was like they had had breath breathed into them, and they were completely new people. That
Hold on, Nick. Hold on, we can't hear you. Something happened maybe with your mic.
Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I was just saying that changed my relationship, I think, in general, to life, really, forever, like to human interaction, but it especially changed my relationship to poetry forever. And then I started encountering other people's work, like yours, Aimee, and other people who were able to tap into a positivity in the world that you know, that I wasn't being introduced to too much in other people's work, and that up until that point I was really like, I didn't even really have a model for. I don't think. I certainly wasn't doing myself. So what I want to ask the two of you, being that you are able to tap into that spirit so strongly, I'm curious how much of that for you is like a fight, how much you really have to work to find that, how organic or not organic that feels to you to get into that place in your writing, or if it just, you know, feels like, yeah, that's I've always been like that. It just flows out of me. It's the most natural thing in the world.
I could start. Nick, that was one of my favorite readings ever. That was so fucking fun, that reading. And like all of it, like the reading was good. Like we had such nice conversations afterwards, like just the time after the reading was good. The place where it was, I can't remember, but it was in kind of like kind of a long hall-ish, but like the side of something, to the side of like something
To the
else.
side of a basketball court.
Oh, hey, see, yeah, I like that. But that was such a fun read. I can even remember like going to the bakery in Racine. There was like it felt like a real kind of homegrown bakery. And I was like, oh man, I'm just gonna go in and look at shit. And no, I can't, because I eat vegan. And I was like, no, I'm not gonna be able to eat anything. And they're like, no, we use Crisco, it's vegan or something. I was like, yeah. But anyway, I wanted to say, as soon as when you started talking about like the effort, so when I was writing that Book of Delights, which is the practice of the Book of Delights, the practice of finding delight every single day for a year, the practice. While I was writing that book, I was talking to my therapist, whose name is Caesar, and he said this phrase. He was like, so you have like a fundamental distrust. I fucking lost my shit. I just cracked up laughing so hard because I was like, oh, right. Part of this visioning the world is visioning the world to sort of help with this other part that is like a significant part of me. Like I do not walk through the world sort of just, you know, like thinking the best or feeling the best, you know, at all, you know. And so I feel like, you know, even the idea of practice, you know, the idea of practice is to sort of, in a certain kind of way, is to, honestly, is to mitigate other substantial feelings that I have that are very challenging, you know, like difficult. Yeah, that's all to say that, like, and I get asked that question a little bit, like, are you sort of, you know, proclivity toward delight? And I'm like, I don't know about that. You know, I kind of think of myself as a little bit of a melancholy dude, actually. But I love that question because I feel like in terms of, you know, you know, just the sort of practice of attending to what you love, despite or in the midst of or with attending to what everything else. It just feels to me like hard work and good work, and work that for me is much easier done in community, you know? So so even the idea of you all writing the book together, it's like if it's like trying to, you know, just trying to keep yourself alive, it's kind of nice when someone else is like, yeah, stay alive today. Stay alive today, you know? You got me tomorrow. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. That's so good. It is such a beautiful question, Nick. Thank you so much. And I'm so excited to know that you and Kelsey are working together on something together. And, you know, it wasn't that long ago, Russ, I think this past summer where, you know, at any given time, if, you know, Russ and I'll have these, like, I don't know, once a month or less often now because we see each other on readings. But we'll have these little chats, checking in, and at any given time you can see, I mean, if someone were to like eavesdrop, it'd be me either weeping or laughing. Like it's two extremes, you know? And I think, and I think I mentioned one of the last times we talked, Ross, that I think there's people who truly know us know better, but I think a lot of people would be surprised to know how melancholy some of our conversations are, you know, which is to say that it is, in 2020, to answer your question, Nick, it is hard. It is absolutely a practice. And while I feel like I am definitely overall an optimist, and in my circle of friends group, I am they would probably consider me, you know, probably the most cheerful one, the most extroverted one. There's a flip side to that, you know what I mean? There's a time where I only want to be by myself, or only where I'm sad. I think many of us have been in a state of grief, certainly for a lot longer, but for me in particular, since 2016. And to come out with a book of wonders, or to come out with a book of delights after that is just, and then have to talk about it. I know how important that is, and I know how, but I also know how important it is to acknowledge the other side, the darker, sad side. What I find though is that when I share that grief, or when I share that enthusiasm, I feel less alone. And the writers, you know, as writers, we are so alone when we're making stuff mostly. But in this collaboration, in any collaboration, it opens up. I don't know. I was just thinking, like, writing the chapbook with Ross, the Gardens chapbook, taught me grace, humility, and patience, I think. And I think that I guess if you haven't collaborated with somebody yet, and if you've just been like, it's not for me, I'm a lone wolf, you know, I get it, because I was very much like that, at least when it comes to writing. It's transformative. It's just transformative for the writing practice. I feel more open to sharing my work in draft form than I ever did before. And more than that, on those times when the writing is fallow, and it will be fallow, I feel like you don't have to just talk about making poems. There's other things to make, and there's other things to connect with, to show your, you know, to share your griefs and your enthusiasms as well, if that makes sense. I don't know. I just feel like, yeah, duh, it should seem obvious, and you know, but it wasn't obvious to me, and that's why I like to say it out loud, like sharing the wonders, sharing your enthusiasms, what you find joyous or wondrous about this planet, and also sharing your griefs makes you feel so alone. So I think it's the tendency is to turn inward, or at least for me, to spiral inward, and I'm just going to write. And I find that when I spiral outward to reach out to my community and stuff, it's so healing, and it doesn't cost a dime, you know. Anyway, so yeah, great question. What else are other people thinking about? Where is everybody from? If you are just kind of hanging out, chiming in, can you drop in the chat like where you are from? I'm just curious to know, in case people didn't hear from the beginning. I'm in Oxford, Mississippi, so I just love chatting with people above the Mason-Dixon line, and just all over it, you know. Illinois, Washington, D.C., Queens, excellent. And I lived in Madison for about a year post grad school, but Milwaukee was basically my point of exit and entry into Wisconsin, you know. It was, yeah, taking that Badger bus. I know that Badger bus quite well. What else? So Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Good. What other questions do y'all have? Arkansas. Oh, we just lost you in this horrific game. Mississippi, I only caught the tail end. I am very ambivalent about college football right now, because I don't think we should be playing at all, but my boys were watching in the background, and yeah, so Arkansas, you had us pretty good. Let me see. Shannon, we were in Mosaic. What is your last name, Shannon, if you don't mind typing it out? That is so funny. Someone in the chat said that we were in the student magazine together at the same time. Shannon Jackson. Oh, I love that. Fantastic. Kelsey, do you want to take that question from Dee? What do y'all hope to grow in your gardens next year? What's on your plate for next year, garden-wise? Oop, can you unmute yourself, Kelsey?
Oops. I want to grow more fruit next year. I didn't do much fruit this year. I tried raspberries. That didn't work out. So definitely lots of fruit.
Aimee, what are you gonna do?
I'm determined to get one of these native cherry trees in my yard, so I don't know what's gonna happen. But we planted a redbud, and then and so that's going. But I'd like to eventually have like kind of like a natural wall up when there. It's trees. I want to do trees. We live in a fairly new subdivision, and one of the things that just I hated about it, I felt like I sold my soul a little bit to live here, is that they cleared so many trees out. So I feel like we have established a pollinator garden pretty well, but now I want to put some trees back, native trees to Mississippi. How about you?
How can I put it? I don't know.
Same old, same old.
Same old, same old. You know, digging those sweet potatoes today, I was like, oh, more sweet potatoes, more sweet potatoes. It is a funny time because it is sort of like, you know, the future.
Mm-hmm.
And still, you know, I'll grow a bunch of greens, maybe more, maybe even more chard and stuff. There's some greens. I'm always looking for greens that I haven't grown before that are, you know, hearty and delicious.
I planted some black nebula carrots this year, but I only was successful with a few of them, but they're so pretty, and I definitely want to grow more of those next year.
Are those dark purpley ones? Yeah. Oh, pretty.
You know, I'm from upper Michigan, and my dad had a farm. It wasn't too big, but I've lived a long time, so I've had a few experiences. I'm not into gardening, but I remember I used to come home from school and see him spreading manure and smell him spreading manure from the barn on the field. He had one of those things that went around and around, and he'd pull it with the tractor, and the manure would fly all over the field for potatoes. And he'd talk about the nitrogen coming in the soil, and he, you know, had some scientific thoughts about it. And but I was thinking about you last night when I was listening about you in the springtime. How do you feel about when you plant? And I mean, you know, the season's coming, and you've got a garden to cultivate and plant stuff and get it in the ground. And then, I mean, I don't know why I was curious about feelings around that time of the year.
Well, this was my first year gardening, so I was pretty anxious and really nervous about it, and just nervous to start just because I had so much self-doubt about it, because I don't know. I was just kind of psyching myself out about it, and then I watched a couple videos, and one of my favorite gardeners that I discovered was Lead Farmer 73, and he just made this video that I just happened to click on on a day where I was thinking about it but having a lot of self-doubt, and he was just saying that just do it. Sometimes you just got to do it, because when you talk about, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it later, you know, it's just sometimes those times never come. You know, sometimes you just got to try, and if it doesn't work out, then you know what to do different next time, but you just do it. Yeah, so I just tried.
So how do you cultivate your dirt, your ground? You just with a shovel, or you have a rototiller, or?
I learned at the community garden to use a pitchfork. I was using a shovel when I started, and I learned that in order to like dig up weeds and things, it's better to use a pitchfork so you can get underneath them. Otherwise, you're just kind of snapping them off, and they're going to come right back. So that's one of the things I learned at the community garden.
Interesting.
I have that feeling of like, is this gonna happen? Is it, you know, and I'm not like, you know, I've been gardening for 50 years, but I've been gardening for nearly 15, and regularly and a lot. And I still, every spring, I'm like, man, I wonder if this is gonna work, you know? And and even just now, I'm working in this kind of collective greenhouse, and we were kind of under the tutelage of this guy named Mark, who was like a real greenhouse grower, and he had it down, and we were kind of following his lead. But he moved to Arkansas, actually. And now we were kind of co-leading this grow, and we were like, all right, we're just gonna do it. And I planted so many but I put the seeds of so many of these brassicas, this whole like you know, 60-foot row, 60 foot by 3.5 foot row of Asian greens. And I was like, and kales and arugula. And I was just like, I've done it a lot of times. And I was like, man, I hope this works. And then when they were all coming up, and now like I keep, you know, like taking pictures, sending my buddy Pat. I'm like, yo, man, look, it's really filling up. So it is the feeling of kind of anticipation of like, I think this, you know, like last night, I can't remember who said it. Kelsey maybe said it, like the seed wants to grow, you know, but kind of like believing that every time. It's kind of like a lucky experience every spring, being like,
That's so nice. I like that.
yeah, it's a nice feeling. Yeah.
I got obsessive about it once I started. Like my whole front porch was full of red Solo cups that I started seeds in. I was just throwing things in dirt just because I just wanted to see what was gonna happen.
That's wonderful.
I had like 10 rhubarb cups. It's just ridiculous.
Wow. That's exciting.
Thanks for that question, and thanks you all. I think we're maybe closing in on our time here, but this has been amazing. I just really can't thank you enough, Kelsey, Aimee, Ross, everyone for these amazing questions. Venus Williams yesterday for the conversation. Yeah, this has been amazing. This is really wonderful. I appreciate you all so much. We all at Woodland Pattern are so grateful. And I guess we're going to say goodnight. And
Well, thank you.
Thank you for letting me be a part of this. This was so amazing. You guys are awesome.
Same here. Yeah, it's wonderful. It's really fun.
Maybe.
So great. I wish we could be all together, but this is the next best thing. Thank you all at Woodland Pattern for everybody joining in on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
all right, good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.